He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and he has it bad. My brother is happy-go-lucky, worked full-time all his life, always positive, so he would have been one of the least persons you'd think that would come down with something so bad. About maybe 2 years ago, it all kicked off over a phone call I got from him. Now, we were always very close and we still are. We would have been the closest of the family, so I probably spotted things quicker than others would. It started with him very slow, so nobody could see it. But as it got worse, it got very bad. He believed that he was being guided, that he was seeing signs of different things. So as in, he worked for a company for years and all of a sudden he quit his job, which was a big one. He would see signs to tell him that he was doing the right thing, and he believed he was being guided, like a spiritual, some kind of spiritual thing. We called it It. That was the name, because we didn't know what it was. So it took over his life completely. It ruined him. So to make a cup of tea, in his head he was making a cup of tea, but in reality he was gone for 2 hours to make the cup of tea. His time would lapse all the time. So he'd go to bed and he'd be up all night in reality, but in his head he was in bed asleep, where it went on for weeks and weeks without sleeping. This thing, which we called, which is the mental illness, would tell him who he could talk to and who he couldn't. If he saw, just an example of 2 magpies, so one for sorrow, 2 for joy, he would think that was a sign that he was doing the right thing. So magpies he saw everywhere, and he would count them. As he was driving, counting became a huge part of it. He could see, it could be anything. Just the clouds could move in a certain way. The trees would talk to him. Everything. No matter where he went, he saw signs of everything. How would I put it? It's a relief in one way to know what he was doing was linked to this. But it's very upsetting because he'll never be the same again. To this day, it's medication and injections, and it's switching medication, constant, lowering one or changing or upping another. There's always hope, but the way now, I just feel sorry for him. He only works 1 day a week now. So he's working today, and he won't recover from today's work for about 4 days. It's 4 days of complete and utter physical exhaustion, where he sleeps most of it. Even with the medication he was on, they put him on another tablet to see would it work, and that tablet actually made him go back psychotic. If he's having a conversation with, just an example, if he was having a conversation with you, in his head, even though he's talking to you and looking at you, in his head it's counting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Constant. So it's very hard to hold a conversation with that going on in your head. Yeah. It never stops. It's either counting or repeating something or anything he hears. It could be something on the radio. His head goes and he can't stop it. As things got worse, he would ring me a lot of times a day. So on one occasion I was in the car driving and he had rang, and I could barely hear him. He was crying that much. So I pulled in and we were yapping, and he was telling me he couldn't take any more, that he was literally at his wit's end of this thing torturing him. And in the morning he agreed to come to our local hospital. So we went to our local hospital and it was a waste of time. We stayed hours and hours, and we met a psychiatrist, and he was interviewed and I was interviewed, and we were all day in there. And because, which I can understand to a point, because he wasn't living in Mayo, They told him go back to his local hospital. But that was the day he said, please help me, to a psychiatrist. So I don't think that should have been a figure. I think it should have been acted on. I think that was the turning point where things went downhill, because then he thought they didn't believe me and no one can help me. Because he would say, I'm not going to no doctor, so what can they do? They'll just see you and throw you out the door. So it really went downhill then, where he thought no one believed him, only me. He became angry. He started smashing things in the house. It wasn't that he was a violent person. It was the fact he kept telling this thing to leave him alone. You know, he'd literally shout at it and be like, leave me alone. Why are you doing this to me? You're destroying my life. He would talk to it as if it was an evil spirit. So it became the stage where we were just waiting on a phone call that something happened. When he'd walk where he lived, he would see gravestones all around him. So I think it was coming to the point of, these were all signs. He came home one night and he was in the house, and the mental illness, or this thing we called it, had told him to go into his van and crash into the tree at the back of the house. And when he did that, he didn't want to do it. He was saying no, like, because that was his only thing for work, and for everything was his van. But when he didn't hit it hard enough, it told him reverse and go harder into the tree, and that's exactly what he did. Thankfully he wasn't injured. So after that he went into the house and went to bed. And he has no recollection of what happened until he went out to get something at the van the next morning and realised his van was all crashed. And he was assessed in Galway for everything, and he was kept. But it all changed where the mental illness had told him to leave, and he tried to break out. So because of that then, and him being extremely sick, they knew he was very bad. They had to restrain him and took him in. So he spent 5 hard weeks there, which we weren't allowed to see him, which was the hardest part.
Yeah.
I collected him on the 5th week, and I didn't recognise my brother at all.
Physically?
Physically.
Yeah.
He was beyond skin and bone. He was like a very old man. He had aged years. Extremely frightened. His walk was that of a 90-year-old step by step. He'd come in here on a good day, normal day before sick, and nearly do cartwheels. He's the lively one of the family that would come on, play ball, and he was always fit and everything, to a point where he was struggling to walk. It's a credit to them. I became very friendly with some of the staff, you know, doctors, and I'll give it to them. They have one hell of a hard job.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
It's not for everybody. It's something I'd love to go into. It's not for everyone. But particularly the doctors were just the contact I had with them, and I didn't have to phone them looking for anything. Every single day they would ring, whether he had a good day or a bad day. There was massive contact. I don't have much contact with them. It's been months since the first phone call, and they've never contacted me since. Which Galway was completely different. You know, they were regular, definitely once a week. They'd be on the phone just to see what I thought or how things were. Mayo seems to be different. If they want to change a tablet, they'll change a tablet. So it's not as good, maybe. I don't want to say that neither, because I know there's so many people sick, and I know they're busy, and I know everything, but they need more help. They need more support.
Would you be optimistic about his future? Would he be optimistic about his future? Because
Very much so.
he's still a young man, really.
Yeah.
So.
I don't think he sees too much. Every day is a struggle. And it's not nice to be 40 and have to struggle like this. It's a struggle to get up. It's a struggle to know you're physically not able to do anything for the day. It's a struggle to watch other people go on. His dream was always to get married and have kids. So it's only 2 weeks ago we were coming from town. I take him to town with me just for the drive to get out of the house, or no matter where I'm going, he comes with me for the spin. And I thought it was very upsetting because we were on about this and that. And, you know, his friends are married, nearly all of them. You know, they're having their kids, and he was just sitting quiet. And I said, there was something on the radio, and I said, would you like to get married? And he just looked at me and he said, who the hell would have me? It's very hard to, but I can see him struggling. If I couldn't see him struggling, you know, you'd say, come on, you need to buck up a bit and get on with life. But no, that's one of those things you have to understand with schizophrenia is he can't do it. Like he went to a pub one night, this is going back 3 years ago now, and he could see vampires in the pub. Like when he said this to me first, I was like, what are you on about? Maybe it was a stag party dressed up, or how do you see them things like? But that was before he got very sick. That was only signs at the start.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were vampires, like literally vampires in the pub, and one of the bar staff was a vampire, and he was petrified. Schizophrenia is one of the hardest mental illness to diagnose and to treat. So to this day, it's medication and injections, and it's switching medication, constant, lowering one or changing or upping another. So therefore, the more medication, the more he's not my brother.
Would you have hope that you can get him back fully? Any hope?
Oh, there's always hope, but the way now, I just feel sorry for him.